Hey guys, Zane here with another One Take review, and today I wanted to talk about ODB, or Old Dirty Bastard's, debut solo album, Return to the 36 Chambers, the Dirty Version. After the massive success of Wu-Tang Clan's debut album, Enter the Wu-Tang, ringleader, I guess you could say, RZA ended up kind of making this hyperbolic ultimate goal to take over the world of music with the ultimate sound and style and lyrical teachings, I guess you could say, of the Wu-Tang Clan. This resulted in a slew of solo albums from members of the Wu-Tang Clan, while the actual Wu-Tang Clan as a collective didn't really put anything out. But these solo albums were, for the most part, pretty much all great. There are some that are a little weaker than others, mind you, but for the most part, it's kind of what the continuation of Wu-Tang Clan as a collective could have and should have been, all of these records together. That being said, none are quite as unique and as distinctive as ODB's solo album. And while he would make several more after Return to the 36 Chambers, none are quite as uniquely him as this one. I mean, ODB's flow here is excellent, but then again, who could really expect any less? After all, he is a man whose legacy still is latching on to this day to his very massive, distinct, and unique personality. Things like unexpected singing, harmonic transitional passages in the middle of songs, direct knowledge of the listener and the audience, a sort of fake audience that is used a couple of times throughout the record, and a general lack of care for what anybody else thinks, even those who are working behind the scenes with him, are what made Old Dirty Bastard such an incredibly striking and defining performer of this period of hip-hop. Very, very few people throughout the history of rap music have had the same unique, powerful, and unhinged lyrical delivery that ODB had, and to see it spread across an entire record on his debut is frankly pretty great to see. After all, I genuinely believe that if he were to just psychotically ramble out one of Lady Macbeth's guilt-ridden monologues from the second half of Macbeth and still had the same exact beats that he's provided with on Return to the 36 Chambers, he would have stayed on beat and probably, I don't know, harmonized with the rhythms in between lines. That's just the kind of rapper that ODB was, and it just goes to show how incredibly, again, not to use the same word repeatedly, but an incredibly unique and downright memorable performer he was, and that, frankly, nobody has been able to capture the same magic that he has since, or at least not this sort of magic. After all, while I do say that ODB is a defining performer of this era of hip-hop, I don't necessarily mean that in the terms of actual style, I mean that in terms of popularity. After all, Wu-Tang Clan are just one of the most influential hip-hop groups of all time, if not in a top 5, perhaps. But what I mean when I say that ODB was a defining figure was he defined himself exclusively, nothing else. But he defined himself so much that there's just no inability to know who he is after hearing just one word from him, in the same way that Busta Rhymes was. Just two very distinct personalities, except maybe ODB was just a little bit more psychotic in terms of delivery, but I digress. Return to the 36 Chambers is relentlessly dark and raunchy in its lyrical content, and Old Dirty Bastard definitely lives up to his name in the songwriting department. Weirdly enough, it never really feels over the top for the most part. Maybe it's because ODB in and of himself was a man of many extremes in terms of performance, but the over-the-top violence and sexual abrasiveness of a lot of the record ends up working in his favor. While I do have a deep respect for every single member of Wu-Tang from the original lineup, I don't think that any other member of the group could have done nearly as well with the lyrics provided here than ODB. The automatically animated nature in which ODB raps ensures that every single lyric stands out, and again, even with this sort of lack of clever writing, there's a very obvious humorous tone that definitely makes up for it for the most part. It seems like everybody working on the record easily recognizes just how easily comedic this could be to some people, the lyricism on Return to the 36 Chambers I'm referring to, and thanks to Old Dirty Bastard and the way that he delivers things, even the most unnecessarily detailed, vivid lyrics are undeniably memorable and quotable, even if they do make me cringe a little bit more in disgust or disbelief than actual, wow, that's bad. Because the lyricism here, while it may not be great in a more cosmic sense, is absolutely perfect for the rapper that we're looking at. The beats here are largely from Wu-Tang Clan mastermind RZA, who can pretty much be credited for this entire record happening in the first place. I don't know if you know this, but those Wu-Tang kids, they're pretty important in the grand scheme of the hippin' and the hoppin' and such. The beats here are actually arguably more gritty than the beats found on the original Enter the Wu-Tang album, which is impressive considering while gangster rap and very criminal, sort of violence-based rap music was definitely a thing by the time Wu-Tang debuted their sound, it was still a shock to the system in terms of just how blunt their lyricism was at times. Then again, some of the most downright psychotic and unhinged lines of that record came from ODB, so maybe it makes sense that the beats here are at their darkest. That being said, maybe some of the beats here are a little too dark in nature for their own good sometimes. While tracks like Going Down do have instrumentals that sound straight out from under the sewer grates directly next to a New York alleyway, they just kind of fail to become any more than just background ambience to support ODB and all of the features on the record, and as such fail to impress for the most part at least. Atmospherically, they work, sure, but that's something you actually have to generally pay attention for, and beyond that, they feel non-existent when you're just casually listening to the record. While Return to the 36 Chambers has plenty of personality in both its MC and the lyrical content to make up for this, a decrease in the lo-fi qualities of the overall instrumentation and production of said instrumentation from RZA maybe could have done the album a little bit better. Speaking of features, considering ODB's origins from one of the most iconic hip-hop, I suppose you could say, supergroups of all time, it only makes sense that other members of Wu-Tang Clan as well as their associates would pop up on Return to the 36 Chambers. Members of Wu-Tang like Raekwon and Method Man appear, among others, to deliver their iconic performance styles on guest verses and generally do as excellent a job as you would expect. Elsewhere, you've got non-Wu members, but affiliates at the time, such as The Genius and Killer Priest, that, again, do some very, very strong work as they're incredibly talented individuals that fit right into the overall style that Wu-Tang and its members would overall create throughout not only this record, but several albums. While none of the features, or very many rappers in general, if I'm being honest, have the same enthusiasm and extreme personality of ODB, the controlled and very serious tone of many of the features here is kind of needed as it delivers a sort of balance between the animation of ODB and a more calm and collected style from pretty much everybody else that's here. It's really required for Return to the 36 Chambers to work as an overall listening experience. So, overall, Return to the 36 Chambers, the dirty version, is a fantastic debut from one of my personal favorite rappers. While it's hard to say what the public perception of the potential of ODB doing a solo record would be in the current year, people in 1995 would have been well within their rights to be skeptical of someone as in-your-face and downright powerful of a performer that ODB is doing a solo record that could potentially stack up to his peers. The late, great Madman himself completely proves any doubters wrong and also turns the entire concept of putting personality in hip-hop inside out. He was just an incredibly unique performer that just unfortunately had a very tragic life and unfortunately didn't release much music either beyond this, only a couple more solo albums and a little bit of work with the Wu-Tang Clan. And although the beats certainly could have been better, or at the very least more prominent, I still do think that Return to the 36 Chambers is one of the best Wu-Tang solo albums, which is why I'm going to give it 4 stars out of 5. If the instrumentation was a bit better, I would consider bumping it up to 4.5, or, depending on how good the instrumentation was, even a 5, but unfortunately, I feel things are just a little too lo-fi for their own good here, but still, ODB as a performer was one of the most unique individuals in not only hip-hop, but just in general of all music. He was immediately recognizable, he had a flow that was like nobody else's, and to this day, I still don't think that people truly appreciate him in full, and unfortunately, I don't know if anybody ever will, but that's kind of just the way that artists like ODB work. He was an incredibly unique performer with no lack of personality whatsoever within his music, and sometimes those artists never truly get understood, and I mean, hey, I don't even really understand him. All I know is that he was an extremely cartoonish and incredibly striking performer, and this album was great. So yeah, 4 stars out of 5, and with that being said, that's the end of this review, and I'll see you guys in the next one.